Hello, everybody. My name is Frankie Maloof. Thank you for joining us once again. It is the Atlanta Sports Podcast. Today is our college football preview show. So if you are a college football fan, and I'm sure most of you are, well, you've come to the right place. Today we're going to be previewing the Georgia Bulldogs, Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, Georgia State Panthers, Georgia Southern Eagles, and at the very end we're going to do something about the Kennesaw State Owls. Thank you for finding us on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play. We're on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. Remember to follow us on Twitter at ATL Sportscast. And we will get started with the Georgia Bulldogs. Luke, let's get started.
All right, well, we have a little bit of breaking news. It's been reported by Scout.com and Elite College Football on social media that Jacob Eason will be UGA's starting quarterback for 2016, or at least for the UNC game. So we just want to put that out there to start, because we're going to be starting with the Georgia Bulldogs, previewing their schedule.
So they'll start off this Saturday, September 3rd, a week from today. Today is Saturday, August 27th, 2016. By the time you're listening to this, it may be later in the week, or maybe Sunday or Monday. We thank you anyway. You go ahead and finish up the show. They start off next Saturday, September 3rd. They go to the Georgia Dome. They get the neutral site game versus North Carolina. And then after that, they get September 10th versus Nicholls State. They continue on the schedule. They start their conference versus Missouri, September 17th. They go to Columbia. Then comes the game versus Ole Miss in Oxford. And they come back home. They get Tennessee at home, on the road to South Carolina, at home versus Vanderbilt, and Jacksonville versus Florida, at Kentucky, home versus Auburn, home versus Louisiana Lafayette, and home versus Georgia Tech. And Luke, what's the toughest game on that schedule?
Well, I think the toughest game is definitely going to be Tennessee. There's really no way it's anyone else right now, just because of the talent that Tennessee has returning. And it's just talent trumps everything, especially in a college football sport. So it's just going to be an interesting game. If UGA can win that, all they have to really worry about is Florida to get through the SEC East. But I think Tennessee is their main opponent this year.
And sure, I might agree that Tennessee's the main opponent. And yes, like you mentioned, if Georgia gets through Tennessee, then they got that date versus Florida in Jacksonville. And that's who I think the toughest game on the schedule will be Florida. Tennessee's at home. You got the home crowd. You might even get the black jerseys, which Georgia might wear. You'll get everything you want on your side, every possible advantage. When you go to Florida, the Dogs have had trouble with Florida recently. Past 20 years or so, Georgia hasn't done very well. I think that's going to be the tough game, just because it always is. It's Florida. Then you could also look, Georgia Tech, I think they'll be better this year. Auburn will be a tough game. And I think Georgia might actually lose to North Carolina in the Georgia Dome. They're a favored team, but I'm thinking that game will be tougher than most people think.
Yeah, North Carolina's got some good talent, not on defense, but mostly on offense. And Georgia has a decent amount of returners on the defensive side, but we'll just have to see if they can put it all together after losing guys like Leonard Floyd, Jordan Jenkins, just guys like that. So Georgia's going to have to figure out how to stop that offense, and if they do, it should be going their way.
Yep, so we'll move on to the rundown of the roster now. Just a few names you might be familiar with now. Jacob Eason, who we know now is a starting quarterback. Nick Chubb has been cleared to play versus North Carolina, which is definitely good news for most Bulldogs out there. He was the Heisman Trophy candidate from last year until he ruined his knee in that injury versus Tennessee that we all remember. He has recovered faster than he was expected to, and he will be ready to play. Hopefully he can overcome everything that's mental right now, and he'll be good to go.
Yeah, one guy who won't be playing, though, is going to be running back Sony Michel. He got hurt in the ATV accident earlier this year. Doesn't look like he'll be cleared to play. And another running back, Elijah Holyfield, went down with an injury. It's apparently not as bad as...
Sprained ankle.
Yeah, sprained ankle. Apparently it's not as bad as thought, but I don't think he'll be playing in that first game.
Well, I don't know. They said that he was in a normal red jersey. I think it was yesterday, maybe, the day before. So there's still a chance. It depends on how good of a day Chubb has.
Yeah, I just think they'll keep him out as a precautionary move, just because they're going to need him for later games, especially if Sony were to stay hurt for a while or have a setback, or if Nick Chubb were to get hurt again.
All right, moving to the defense, we have Quincy Mauger. He will be the safety, or one of them. Dominic Sanders also has his spot locked down, it looks like. Other than that, there's really a lot of room for new guys to jump in.
Yeah, it's really interesting with what you mentioned with Dominic Sanders. A lot of websites, reporters, NFL draft scouts are kind of down on him But I think he's one of the better prospects in this NFL draft, and he's one to really watch. Doesn't have a lot of numbers in the statistical category, just because the ball is not generally thrown his way, just out of respect for him as a player. But on that defensive side, there's some names. Trenton Thompson, a former 5-star recruiter. I really think this is his chance to shine on that defensive line. If he can get some good pass pressure, run stopping, do what he's supposed to do as a 5-star recruit. That'll be big for that Georgia defense. Also, Lorenzo Carter's going to have to rebound after an average season last year and get better this year and have a good year to replace, guys like guys like Leonard Floyd that we mentioned earlier.
I definitely think Lorenzo Carter, he has a very high ceiling. He just has to realize his potential. He could be a major factor for the Dogs this year, and I think he's an important one that they need to have. So the other thing is the special teams, it's not really set right now. We lost Marshall Morgan from last year. I guess we have returners. We could just use the running backs. It depends on what they'll do. Maybe Sony Michel once he gets healthy. And, Isaiah McKenzie, how could I forget? He was the electric returner from last year, his punt returns, and kickoff returns too, although not as much. So we'd be okay special teams, and then we maybe have Bryce Ramsey be punting again. What do you think?
Yeah, that all sounds good to me. It's just they're going to need to get settled at kicker with their, the backups from last year getting all put together in terms of who can make good field goals, be consistent on PATs. Just little things like that. The kicking game will be big this year for the Dogs if they want to win some major games. So they just need to get that sorted out.
And if you remember Marshall Morgan back in 2012, I think it was, he was the one that missed 4 extra points or 5 extra points. So even if the kicker, whoever it is this year, has a down year, he'll be okay. He'll turn out all right. Just need to get over the nerves of the first year. So what is expected for the Dogs this year? They fired a coach that won 9 games, and Mark Richt, I'm sure you all remember. So I think 10 wins has got to be what's expected or what's needed this year for Kirby Smart's debut.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right to expect less than that, but I'm going to go with just 8 or 9 at minimum. Now, I think they will exceed that mark. I think 10 will be where they go, around that range, 9-ish, but I think that really I'd be okay with 8 wins as a UGA fan, as long as they didn't get blown out by Tennessee or Florida. Just staying competitive, but maybe not winning the games, just showing improvement game by game.
And yeah, the schedule is not really that tough this year. North Carolina, Tennessee, and Florida are the 3 toughest games. And then if Auburn turns out to be good this year, and then Ole Miss. Ole Miss will be good. That'll be a tough game too.
Yeah, and you can't forget about Georgia Tech either. It's a tough game no matter what, just with the rivalry setting of it. But there's a lot of what-ifs, because Georgia Tech has to be good, Auburn has to be good, Ole Miss has to be good. But if they're not, that's a lot of X factors. One of them maybe won't be good when we play them. But that Ole Miss game will definitely be interesting.
Sure, and then new faces, Kirby Smart, almost the whole coaching staff. I think the only ones that return, Tracy Rocker, the defensive line coach, and Kevin Scherer, I hope I pronounced his name right. He's the linebackers coach. Those are the 2 that remained on the staff. Everybody else, the defensive coordinator, Mel Tucker, he was from Alabama. He was the secondary coach there last year. And then the offensive coordinator, Jim Chaney, was the offensive coordinator at Pittsburgh last year. And I think that he'll be a good offensive coordinator. I think that he'll teach the quarterbacks well. And I think Kirby Smart made a good choice with his coaching staff.
Yeah, I really like the addition of Chaney as the offensive coordinator, just because he's worked with guys like Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers in their college careers. And I just think that he can take that experience and apply it to Jacob Eason as a young quarterback, and hopefully, if he can turn out to be like those other 2, he'd be doing pretty well.
Yep, sure. And in the recruiting class, obviously we mentioned Jacob Eason, 5-star quarterback out of the state of Washington. We had Isaac Nada, the 5-star tight end. He was originally from Buford, then he transferred to the IMG Academy down in Florida, where he got even better. And then McCole Hardman is another name that you need to know right now. He might not get as much playing time this year because he's trying to specialize on his position, but he's an athlete and can play anywhere. And the recruiting class as a whole was ranked 8th by 24/7 Sports Composite Rankings. And I think they have a good chance to even increase on that rank next year in the recruiting classes, get 5th or maybe even 1st.
Yeah, Kirby Smart's a great recruiter. He's known as a recruiter, and I just think that he does a really good job, especially on that defensive side, of showing players that he really wants them to come to Georgia, and he needs them at Georgia in order to ensure success for his football team. But Kirby's one of those guys that I think is really a special guy in terms of recruiting. So look for a lot of 5 stars, a lot of names to swing the way of UGA in these next year or two.
Okay, so just recapping the major storylines leading into Game 1, and then we'll move on to Georgia Tech. The quarterback situation, but we fixed that problem. Jacob Eason has been named the starter. At least that's the reports we're getting right now. Nick Chubb has been cleared to play. He will be playing on Saturday in the Georgia Dome versus North Carolina. And then the third major storyline, the secondary. Early on, Kirby Smart kind of had some critical comments for the secondary, it was supposed to be ranked first and for the secondary last year, but Kirby Smart said that it was protected by Leonard Floyd and George Jenkins. So look for the secondary to step up this year. And the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, we're moving on to them. They went 3-9 last year, very disappointing. They ruined their 18-game streak of going to a bowl game. I really don't think that they'll do that again. I think they will definitely get 6 wins. I think they will get probably more than that. I think they'll be better than people expect. They got a senior quarterback in Justin Thomas, and their schedule isn't that hard.
Yeah, Georgia Tech last year, they went 3-9. Really surprised me as a college football fan. It was their school's worst record in 21 years. That's a long time. So it's, Tech's got to improve. The only way to go is up, even though when you break down their roster, it may not look that way.
So we'll start off with their schedule, move on to the roster later. They go to Ireland, Dublin, Ireland, in Aviva Stadium. They play Boston College. They come back home September 10th for Mercer. They play the Mercer Bears. Then they get a date at home versus the Vanderbilt Commodores. Then they have the Clemson Tigers come to town on Thursday, September 22nd. It's a Thursday night game on ESPN. And then Miami comes to town on October 1st. Then they go to Pittsburgh. Then they have Georgia Southern come back to Atlanta. Then they're off for a week and then have Duke at Georgia Tech. North Carolina, they go up to Chapel Hill. They go to Virginia Tech up in Blacksburg, Virginia. Virginia Cavaliers, they come to Atlanta, and then they go up to Sanford Stadium in Athens to take on the Bulldogs. So what are your takes on this one, Luke? I don't think their schedule looks extremely hard outside of they have Clemson, who was the national runner-up last year and expected to do at least the same this year. And in Georgia, that's a tough game up in Athens.
Yeah, they've got those two, but outside of that, the one I'm looking at is Miami versus the Hurricanes. Now, it's at Bobby Dodd, but it's just going to be very interesting because Mark Richt seems to be doing a very good job with that team in Miami, has a really good quarterback, a top NFL draft prospect in Brad Kaya. So if they can turn out and pull everything together, have a good season, and take that NFL talent and use it to win college games, which they haven't seemed to be doing well recently, then Georgia Tech will have a tough match on their hands on Saturday, October 1st.
And my game that I was looking at, besides Georgia and Clemson, is North Carolina. Last year, North Carolina broke all sorts of school records. They had a very potent offense, and they took Clemson to the wire in the ACC championship game. Look for the Tar Heels to do it again, maybe win the Coastal Division. I don't know. Tech or Miami might be able to match them with that, but I still think North Carolina will be a tougher opponent for both Georgia and Georgia Tech this year. And then don't sleep on Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is still really looking to get that upset. They almost did it a few years ago. Look for them to maybe make another push this year.
Yeah, Georgia Southern did a nice job against UGA last year in a tough game that should not have gone down to the wire like it did. But Georgia Tech, breaking down their roster, it's just really... their defense doesn't seem like it's going to be very good. Georgia Tech needs to replace all 4 secondary starters, including Kansas City Chiefs draft pick DJ Wyatt, and they really don't have any next-level talent on this defense, not even talent that they would expect to maybe go to CFL or anything like that. Just doesn't look to be better than average. They really need to improve on their sack numbers. They only had 14 last year. Those are ACC's lowest. And they just got to get more pass rushers into that.
Maybe we know where the Falcons are getting their pass rushers.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and then offensively, Justin Thomas is the quarterback. Last year he had sort of a junior slump, if you will. He was very inconsistent. They had lots of fumbles. I know there was an article about that in the AJC not too long ago if you follow them. Georgia Tech will be much better. I don't think he will let his senior season get away from him. So if anything else, Justin Thomas will have a great year this year. He won't have a very good offensive line, but the running backs will be better, and the triple option offense, if they can get it down, if they can learn how to do it right, it will be a major weapon.
Yeah, Georgia Tech is going to need some production this year. If they don't produce, their head coach, Paul Johnson, could be fired for inconsistency as a head coach. And by inconsistency, I mean they've lost at least 6 games in 4 of the last 6 years. And those other 2 years, they've had good years. But outside of that, it's just not been good for them.
I definitely think they will get more than 6 wins this year, which would put them at 7-5. So that's less than your 6 losses right there. I don't know if they're quite ready for the ACC to make it to the ACC championship game this year. Maybe not this year, but I think they'll be able to climb back into that contention at least. Major storylines, it's just can the Jackets rebound from their 3-9 season? I really think that they will. I mean, there's no question that they're not going to go 3-9 this year. They're going to make a bowl game, and I think they will, like I just said, they will contend for the ACC Coastal Division title.
They had an average recruiting class this year, 59th by 24/7 Sports Composite. Just a decent job by them, rebuilding a little bit of that talent that they lost.
I think they can do a better job in recruiting. I really don't think. Obviously, the academic standards are tougher for them, just like at Vanderbilt or any other school like that. They get hindered a little bit by that, but I think they'll be able to do a better job, or they need to do a better job if they're going to stay at the top.
Yeah, 59th is okay, but if they want to get out of that 3-9 level and keep contending for bowl games on a consistent basis, they're going to really need to do better in that recruiting category. And thank you to Rich Sermonello for the Georgia Tech info. Check him out on collegefootballnews.com. Put together a really nice Georgia Tech football preview. We used some of that information from him, and it was really well written.
Sure was. All right, moving on to Georgia State. Their schedule, not as tough as Georgia Tech's or Georgia's. We're starting to get into the Sun Belt Conference. They play the Ball State Cardinals in the Georgia Dome. They go at Air Force. That'll be a tough game, I think, for them. And then they go to Wisconsin, at Appalachian State, at home in the Georgia Dome versus Texas State, at Troy, at home versus the UT Martin Skyhawks, at South Alabama, at home versus Arkansas State, at home versus ULM, Louisiana Monroe. Then they're at home versus Georgia Southern. That will be a big game. They get an off week, and then they go to Idaho in the Kibbie Dome in Moscow.
Yeah, they're going to have some tough games in their schedule. It's not a very tough schedule, as you previously mentioned. But I'd say, if we had to name their toughest game, I'd definitely say it's versus the Wisconsin Badgers.
Okay, that's not even fair. That's one of those games where Georgia State's going to be making a ton of money to go up there and lose. But if they can hang in there, that will be a great win for the program. So it's not a complete loss. They're supposed to lose, but if they play well, and they do great. They get a lot of national attention, just like they did when they beat Baylor in the NCAA basketball tournament a couple years ago. So they're starting to get more on of a national stage. This one's on Big Ten Network, so Georgia State's been able to promote themselves a little bit more every year, especially with the bowl appearance last year. I think that they'll be able to do it again. Look for them to win 6 games at least. At least 6 games. I think they'll be much better.
Yeah, so Georgia State, we're just going to run through some needs of how they need to get better. And they really need to improve their run game. They averaged 3.1 yards per carry last year. That's not enough to have a good offense. Georgia State will be returning their top 4 rushers, and their offensive line is returning 4 starters. So if they can keep improving, then that's going to look really good for them to have their players back and to keep going in that system.
And again, special thanks to Pete Flutek from collegefootballnews.com. You can check him out there. He provided some of this info, and it was, again, very well written by those people there at collegefootballnews.com. So piggybacking on what you said, we're going to go down to the best players, the offense. Penny Hart, he's a sophomore. As a freshman last year, he led the team with 71 catches for 1,099 yards and 8 touchdowns. If you didn't get a chance, you can check out my piece on AtlantaSportsPodcast.com under the blog tab. I did write something about the offensive impact players for each of these teams that we're talking about today. And Penny Hart was my choice for the offensive impact player for Georgia State. I think it's a safe bet to say that he's the one that they're going to rely on a lot this year. And I think that maybe down the road, if he continues to have the seasons that he's having, if he has one this year and even next year, the NFL might be in his future.
Yeah, they really might be with those statistics that he's been putting up. Defensively, linebacker Caleb Ringer, he's a senior, got some good experience in that system. He should be their leading tackler. He's going to have every opportunity to make all the plays that he can next year. And their season really should be a success if they reach a bowl game. and really just have a good year and get better game by game and then make it to that bowl game. And it would really be nice for them to win it. It would be huge for that program.
Definitely would be. And just a quick note about the recruiting class, it was ranked 125th by 24/7 Sports Composite. They could improve there. I really think they could. The way that they've been winning, I think that if they make a bowl game this year, they win the bowl game, recruiting will take care of itself. It definitely will.
Yeah, and down at their program, they're going to have a lot of guys that weren't heavily recruited, and they have a chip on their shoulder. And that's really why they're playing so well. They're just using that as motivation, just not being recruited. And that's where you get guys like Penny Hart having a great season. So you just look for them to have guys in that 125th recruiting class that still turn out to be really good players just because they're very well motivated.
All right, so we're going to move on to the Georgia Southern Eagles. Their schedule, they start off in Statesboro versus Savannah State. Then they go out to Alabama and they play the South Alabama Jaguars. Then they play the Louisiana Monroe Warhawks in Statesboro, at Western Michigan, at Arkansas State, at Georgia Tech. That will definitely be an interesting game. Make sure to check that one out. At New Mexico State. Then they come back home versus Appalachian State. Then they go out to Mississippi. They play the Ole Miss Rebels. Then they come back home and they play Louisiana Lafayette. Then they go to Georgia Dome, so a short trip there, and they play the Georgia State Panthers. You can also check that one out. That one will be definitely a good game. Then they come back home and have Troy at home. Luke, I think that they will have a shot to knock off at least one of their two, Georgia Tech or Ole Miss. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, Georgia Tech's going to be a really good game for Georgia Southern. They've upset some teams here and there, across the board. But it's just going to be really interesting to see what they can do with Georgia Tech. They might be able to pull out a win if Tech has another down year like they did last year. But it should be a competitive game.
I think it will definitely be competitive, even if Tech is doing great. If Tech's rolling, undefeated, and going to this game, Georgia Southern will still put up a dogfight, and I think that they still have a legitimate chance to pull this one out.
And about Ole Miss, I don't even think that will be much of a game. I think that's going to be one of those where Ole Miss comes in and has a tough time at the start of the game because, Georgia Southern always seems to come out motivated. But if they can come out and really give them a good game, I think they'll be able to keep Ole Miss stalled for a quarter or two, but I think that's where the talent's going to start to take over for the Rebels.
Not just the talent, but the depth as well. The depth of having 3-star recruits versus 2-star recruits in your back end of your depth chart. That will come up huge in that game. So moving on to the roster, Matt Breda is the running back. He is a potential high-round draft pick next year. He rushed for over 1,600 yards last year on 200 carries, just over 200 carries. He's the impact player once again from my blog post. You can check that out on AtlantaSportsPodcast.com. Kevin Ellison and Fabian Upshaw, they're two of the dual threat QBs. They will definitely come up huge in this triple option offense. It'll be curious to see if this new coaching staff is going to include the pass more, just because the triple option offense has been working so well for them. Okay, they have 4 starters up front returning on defense, on the defensive line. That will be a major component of their defense. They got 4 starters returning, like I said. If they can get pressure on the quarterback, everything else will take care of itself. You don't need good secondary if the quarterback has to throw off balance and hurried and everything else. So the defensive line might be used as protection kind of for the rest of their defense. So what is expected? A Sun Belt title. Georgia Southern fans, they won it their first year up when they moved up from the FCS. Last year they did not win the Sun Belt title. They did go to a bowl game, and I think Georgia Southern faithful are getting a little antsy. They want to win one for real when it matters.
Yeah, it would be really good for that program again, just to get that bowl game win, that conference win. It would just be really good for them to do. And they have a new head coach, Tyson Summers, and he's from Colorado State. He was their defensive coordinator, so he was there under former Georgia coach Mike Bobo.
So yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what changes he makes to the program. If he's going to stray a little bit from the triple option offense that's been working so well, I think he's going to keep the system mainly the same. But the different changes will certainly be obvious the first game versus Savannah State. The recruiting class, they was ranked 73rd by 24/7 Sports Composite. So they almost had a better recruiting class than Georgia Tech, which is something the Jackets need to watch out for. So Tech was 59th in the recruiting rankings by 24/7 Sports, like I said earlier, and Georgia Southern is 73rd. Now Georgia State's 125th. So there's a gap between Tech and Southern, and then Georgia State. I think Georgia State will be able to increase that rank next year, and Georgia Southern, they might catch Tech if Tech doesn't have a good year this year.
Yeah, and this may turn into a big recruiting battle in the state of Georgia with these teams so close. Now Georgia is pulled way ahead, and Georgia State is way behind, but those two teams in the middle are going to have a tough competition there fighting for those recruits, and especially if Georgia State can get back on the map, get in the top 100 again.
So, okay, some brief notes about Kennesaw State. They are in their second season. Last year was their inaugural season. And so they're open up this season versus East Tennessee State. Then they have a home game again versus Point University, at Duquesne, at Furman, versus Missouri, S&T, versus Liberty, at Gardner-Webb, at Monmouth, versus Clark Atlanta, versus Presbyterian, and at Charleston Southern. So out of those, I think Furman is the biggest name. Maybe Charleston Southern or Gardner-Webb. But those are the big names out of that group. Excuse me. Out of that group. Those will be the toughest games. Last year, Kennesaw State was 6-5. They had a winning record in their first season, which was very unexpected in my part. I didn't expect them to do that. So this year they returned 19 starters, including senior quarterback Trey White, who was from St. Pius X Catholic High School in Atlanta. He was the quarterback last year, and he had a pretty good season. Kennesaw State had a good offense last year. If you remember some of their first games, they scored 55 points several times, I think, or more than 50 a few times. Look for the offense to be good this year again. Defense also has some returning starters, and I think what's expected this year, they need a winning season to keep this momentum up. I think it's possible. I even think they'll do it. Their recruiting class was ranked 204th, so not bad there. It was ranked 204th by 24/7 Sports Composite once again. So not bad. I think that they can improve on that ranking this year with another good season.
Yeah, if they can pull out another winning season, again, defy some expectations, I think we'll see that ranking climb up into the top 175, up at least 29 spots.
It'll definitely grab recruits' attention, and this year, I think they might even get ranked. If they start off hot, I think they'll be ranked in the FCS polls.
Yeah, watch out for them. They could be really off to a hot start, especially looking at that schedule. It doesn't seem to be very tough.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can definitely do it. The one thing you got to watch out for is, are they going to have a sophomore slump? Second year, expectations are going to be higher this year for sure. Fan base, everybody knows who they are. Will they catch anybody by surprise this year? I don't think so. So they're going to have to do what they do and hope that they're still okay with it.
We're going to move into our national rundown, give you some top 10s from the coaches and AP poll. So we'll start out with number 1.
Yeah, so between the two polls, they were very similar. And I think that there's only a few differences towards the back end. The first 4, which is all that matters right now, they were the same, exactly. The only difference was the vote counts, the first place votes.
So yeah, starting out with number 1, Alabama was number 1 in both, as you mentioned, garnering 55 first place votes in the coaches poll, 33 in the AP. Number 2 is Clemson, 7 first place votes in the coaches poll, and 16 in the AP. Oklahoma, number 3, did not get any first place votes for the coaches poll, but in the AP poll they got 4. And in the number 4 slot, Florida State had 1 first place vote in the coaches poll and 5 in the AP. So now moving on to number 5, Ohio State and in the coaches poll. And number 5 in the AP poll was LSU. So that was our first discrepancy between the two. Number 6, LSU in the coaches poll. And in the AP poll, number 6 was Ohio State. Number 7 in the coaches poll, Stanford. In the AP, Michigan. Number 8 in the coaches poll was Michigan, and in the AP poll was Stanford. Number 9 in the coaches poll, Notre Dame, and in the AP poll, Tennessee. And then number 10 in the coaches poll, Tennessee, again getting that first place vote in the coaches poll, and Notre Dame, number 10 in the AP poll. So that rounds out your top 10.
So yeah, the only differences are just a few flip-flops. You had LSU and Ohio State flipping in the two polls, Stanford and Michigan flipping 7 and 8, and then Notre Dame and Tennessee flipping 9-10. Among those teams, Alabama is expected to be up there. Clemson, I think, will have a good year. Oklahoma will win the Big 12. Florida State, it'll be neither one or not, both of them won't make it. Clemson and Florida State both won't make the top 4. Right now they're there. But remember, these polls don't matter. It is the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, and they won't release their first polls until the middle of October, I think. So the ranked Georgia teams, Georgia was ranked 16th in the coaches poll and 18th in the AP poll. Georgia Tech, Georgia State, and Georgia Southern were not ranked. Now, Division II, West Georgia was ranked 3rd in the Division II coaches poll. Valdosta State was 14th in the Division II coaches poll. And if you remember, West Georgia went on a big run last year. They almost went to the finals of the Division II playoffs. So look for them to have a good year, and Valdosta State as well. So we'll finish out with our Power 5 predictions. So I'll start off, Luke. I'll start with the SEC. I pick LSU to win the SEC title. I think that they will beat either Tennessee or Georgia. I think Georgia has a shot at getting to the SEC East title. If they can beat Tennessee and Florida, they're in. Now, that's harder than it sounds, but I still think it'll be LSU winning the SEC title. ACC, I think Clemson will take care of business with Florida State. Then I think that Clemson will also dismantle whoever they get in the title game. It should be North Carolina, I think, or maybe Miami under Coach Mark Richt. Big Ten, Ohio State will beat Michigan. They will take the honors, and then they will go win the Big Ten title as well. Big 12, Oklahoma will have no trouble. Pac-12, UCLA will win that one, I think. And Luke, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts, we'll start off with the SEC. I think that Alabama will be winning that SEC just because they have talent. Now, Alabama and SEC both do not have a very good quarterback situation, but I think Alabama has a better chance at finding a quarterback. ACC, I have Florida State. I just think they'll be able to pull out enough wins. And Big Ten, I have Michigan. Big 12, Oklahoma. And Pac-12, I picked Washington. I wanted to go out of the box on this one. I think they have enough talent and coaching to win their championship as long as they can get some good wins.
And that just about does it. Thank you for listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast. Remember to check us out on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. You can find us on Twitter at ATL Sportscast, on Google+, we're the Atlanta Sports Podcast. You can follow us there. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week with another show.
We might never get a break from this comedy of errors. You know that slide